talk about where I'm from a whole lot. We went around Stirling and we looked at my favourite places here, and I can't really take you around Northumberland right now because I'm not there, but I do want to talk a little bit about where I'm from because it is important to me and it's important to my identity. Northumberland is a region, a county of England, which has its name kind of derived from the old kingdom of Northumbria, which used to be one of the largest kingdoms in ancient, medieval, kind of pre-England Britain. Northumbria used to occupy a huge amount of land, and now it is still one of the largest counties in the UK. We have the most castles of any English county, and I am really proud of the culture and heritage that comes from the place where I was born. We share a lot of that heritage with Newcastle and Durham. We share a fair amount of that heritage with Scotland, especially the borders. But we also have a lot of our own unique traditions and music and culture. And the first thing I want to talk about is the music, because it is such a core part of me and how I grew up. So I have grown up in brass bands all of my life. I am a third generation brass player. All of my siblings play, my parents play, my granddad plays, my auntie plays, my uncle used to play. It's a big deal in my family. And its history is so tied to the mines. Most bands started as colliery bands, bands within a single workplace, within a single colliery. And quite often the colliery would pay for their rehearsal space and their instruments and sometimes give them days off to go and compete. And yes, we compete. There's a big area and national competition every single year, well, except for 2020 and 2021. There are march competitions and entertainment competitions and festival weekends. It's so much fun, and it used to be all men and pretty much all white men because it used to be the people who worked in the mines. There's a lot more women involved now, which is really positive, even though it wasn't that common even up until about the 70s or 80s, which was when my mum was starting to play. So there's a lot of folk songs. We share a lot of them with Durham and Newcastle, like Water of Tyne, Elsie Marley, War Geordie's Losties Penka. But there's ones that are really specific to Northumberland as well, like Felton Lunnon. If you get the chance to listen to any of these, go, because they're either really fun or really beautiful. You got people like the Unthanks who have songs written in a modern style but are still folk music and are still written in the Northumbrian dialect, and I think that's really cool. And the last thing I want to talk about, all of my friends know that I kind of hate bagpipes. Look, I just think there's a better option. You've got the Northumbrian short pipes, which I love. They have a very similar sound. They have a bellows system. Instead of blowing into a bag to inflate it and then blowing the air out, you have the bellows system giving you a constant airflow without having to blow into it. And you can get a full chromatic scale, which you can't do on Scottish bagpipes. I'm sorry. I know a lot of people love them and I know they're not going anywhere anytime soon, but I'm not a fan. Speaking of the singing, I want to talk a little bit about the language. There is some debate as to whether the Northumbrian language, or Pitmatic or Pityaka as a whole, which encompasses some Durham and Newcastle as well, whether that is a language or a dialect. For my part, I wrote an entire essay in the second year of my undergrad about how it is a language, and about the ways that it has low prestige, and about the reasons why I don't use it in my everyday life. I don't even use it here. You're probably hearing the accent a little bit, but I don't tend to use the dialect words at all, and I have a much stronger accent when I'm talking to my family. So the first recorded reference of Pitmatic or Pityaka or any other name referring to that language was in the Newcastle Weekly Chronicle in 1873. So it's fairly recent as far as languages go, but words within it have been developing for thousands of years. You've got the word yem, which anyone from Scandinavia might recognise as the word home. And the reason why Northumbrian has a lot of Scandinavian in it is because Lindisfarne, which you might know for being the place where Vikings first landed to start raiding monasteries and abbeys, that's because Lindisfarne is an island off the Northumbrian coast. If you come to Northumberland, you probably won't hear people calling it Lindisfarne. A lot of people call it Holy Island, which is what I knew it by growing up. So yem comes from medieval Northumberland, in contrast to something like bait, which comes from definitely the mining era because it means lunch, and your lunch as a miner would be brought in a tin bait box because it was the most hard-wearing to survive the mines. And even now the language is evolving and changing. You have a word like Gaji, which on the face of it means man, but it's developed a lot of different connotations, and it'll be slightly different depending on who you ask. For me, a Gaji is a very particular kind of very Northumbrian, probably middle-aged man. The Northumbrian Language Society has described it as anyone wearing a flat cap, which I find kind of hilarious. And it's also a title, as in the Morpeth Gaji, which is a kind of official position. I'm not 100% sure what he does, but he has a fancy hat. And the last thing I want to talk about is our tartan. This stuff is known as border tartan, Northumbrian tartan, or also shepherd's plaid. And it might actually be one of the oldest tartans that we have. It dates back at least to a fragment that was found in a bottle in 270 AD in Falkirk, which is not that far away from where I live now. And it's been worn by shepherds in the borders and in Northumberland for centuries. And the reason why we think this is older than most other tartans is because most other tartans contain at least some form of colour, which means they had to use vegetable dyes. And before the dyeing process, you had to weave your tartan from colours that you already have. And sheep's fleece comes predominantly in black and white, and sometimes brown. I love this stuff. It is a symbol of my heritage and where I grew up, and if you try to call it gingham, I will hate you forever. Okay, a scarf isn't actually that important, but like, you get where I'm coming from. I'm proud to be from Northumberland. And it's one of the reasons why I don't consider myself English. I consider myself Northumbrian, because it's such a bigger part of my life than broad Englishness or Britishness. And even though I don't live there anymore, I'm really happy to have things like music and tartan and my accent to connect me to the place where I'm from. And even if our industry died in the 80s, which I'm not going to get political, so we're not going to talk about that for very long, it's still got gorgeous landscapes, rivers, hills, beaches, beautiful abbeys and cathedrals and castles. Harry Potter was filmed in Alnwick Castle. But don't come as tourists. We don't want tourists to, like, spoil it. Tomorrow's video. There we go. Another cover. I'm actually kind of excited to do one of these again. There might be a small amount of redemption. So I'll catch you tomorrow, and happy VEDIM.